Hi again, it's Carol Anderson from downtown Salt Lake City with another introduction to a Met free stream. The Metropolitan Opera has been very generous with sharing its archival content, not only HD streams from the film, the movies, but also some of their older material from the earlier age of singing. You know, we had that Joan Sutherland Don Giovanni last week. So all eras being represented, not just the era of HD cinema. Today we will have a slightly lesser known Verdi opera. For me, sometimes with these lectures, I'm just a step or two ahead of you because I'm often talking about an opera that I've never done. I haven't done all of the talks, but there have been 98 broadcasts because there will have been 98 broadcasts next week because we're in week 11. So up to this point, it's a lot. And so I've been sometimes having to learn about operas that I didn't know well or I only knew peripherally. For instance, in Ernani, I only am familiar with two of the arias, the baritone aria and the soprano aria. So it's been a fun journey of discovery for me, adding to my repertoire and knowledge of some works that I only peripherally knew. So Verdi had his first big success with Nabucco, and it eventually traveled to Venice, where it was also equally popular. They had 25 performances in the 1842-43 La Fenice season. So after that great success, that great outing in Venice, Verdi began negotiation with the impresario of La Fenice, the Phoenix, to stage I Lombardi, which is it's an opera about the Crusades, and then to also write a new opera. It is kind of interesting if you look at, and this is just a thought that came into my own head. It's not a musicological certitude, if you will, but after Un Giorno, Verdi's first few operas were premiered at La Scala in Milan, and his comedy Un Giorno di Regno was very poorly received by the public, and it's sort of after that there were a couple more operas premiered in La Scala, and then he kind of took a break from working with La Scala for premieres. I think he felt a little bit betrayed by the Milanese public. So he still did he worked in premieres in Rome, in Venice, which we're talking about tonight, in Naples, and he never quite forgave the La Scala audiences for their reception of his comedic effort. There were some premieres later on, like I say, that were in La Scala, but Verdi had a lot of feelings about that. So the subject for this opera was chosen from the works of Victor Hugo. And Victor Hugo's most famous work is, of course, Les Miserables. But he also wrote Le Roi s'amuse, the king amuses himself, which was the source for Rigoletto, which is a bit later. The librettist engaged for Ernani was Francesco Maria Piave. Piave wrote several other libretti for Verdi, including, again, Rigoletto, also based on the work of Victor Hugo, and La Traviata, based on a different Frenchman, Alexandre Dumas. Besides Hugo and Dumas, Verdi had a great affinity for Shakespeare, so his literary sources were actually quite high quality. He was a very knowledgeable and erudite man. So the Ernani, the play by Victor Hugo, is mostly known for its association with Verdi, but also there is a dramatic riot, and riots, plural, associated with its run in Paris in 1830. So there was a conflict. We were at a transitional point where the classicists were trying to hold on to the old ways of writing, but then young bucks like Hugo, were coming in and sort of trying to break down the traditions and move forward with the new ideas of French Romanticism. So when Ernani was premiered, there was this big dichotomy between classicism and romanticism. So Hugo enlisted the support of his romantic colleagues, with a capital R, not romantic like in the sense of a relationship, such as Hector Berlioz, who we talked about a little bit earlier this week. God, it was just last night, I think. And Théophile Gautier, to combat the opposition of these classicists who wanted to hang on to their old values. So he brought in these groups of romantic supporters, or you could call them proto-bohemians. That's one place called them that. They're the ancestors, or the direct roots of the bohemians that then were written about for scenes of the Bohemian life that became the subject for La Boheme of Puccini. So that was kind of mid-19th century. So these were the proto-bohemians. They to ensure that Ernani was not shut down by the censors like some of his previous works, Hugo brought in what he called a romantic army. These were, like I said, young bucks who dressed sort of outlandishly. They came in very bizarre outfits, these proto-bohemian outfits, so that they could look as outlandish as possible. They were mostly quite young, though already accomplished. So they were locked in the auditorium. They ensconced themselves in the auditorium for the 3 hours. And so by the time the actual audience of bourgeois, middle class, more stuffy folks arrived, the auditorium was in disarray. The Bohemians had kind of thrown trash around and just made themselves at home. And so it was the bourgeois audience members were just appalled at what they saw and at these absurd people who were already there. Ernani stayed on the stage for 100 performances, and they assembled one of these romantic armies, or there was always an argument or a scuffle, some sort of to-do about every performance. So it never actually went ahead smoothly. It was a big source of conflict. So Ernani was successfully premiered as an opera in 1844, and within 6 months had been performed at 20 other theaters in Italy, as well as in Vienna. This next period of Verdi's life, really starting in 1842, but for sure after Ernani and up into 1853, were a time that Verdi was on the road constantly. He was always supervising premieres in new cities, new productions, just on the road constantly. Verdi referred to it as his anni di galera, his years as a galley slave, so just rowing to keep up with his pace of life. Ernani centers around the character of Elvira, who is our soprano, who is caught between her love and or duty to three men. Love for and or duty to three men. So it's not a love triangle, it's a love polygon or a love quadrilateral. We first have Don Juan of Aragon. This takes place in Spain. He is a disenfranchised nobleman. He's lost his title, he's lost his lands, and he's living in the mountains as a bandit leader, an outlaw leader. Then we have, he's the tenor. Then we have Elvira's much older guardian, Da Silva, who is a bass. Da Silva is hoping to marry Elvira. The guardian wanting to marry the young ward is a common trope in opera. We have that for Barbara Seville, although a much lighter subject and a happier ending. So he's our bass. And then we have Don Carlo, the king of Spain, who is our baritone. So Elvira is dreading the marriage that is facing her, and so she has a double aria. We've talked a lot about double arias. I discovered somehow in my musical education I missed this term, which is solita forma, which means essentially the usual form, and that is another fancy word, solita forma, another fancy word for the bel canto double aria. This is early in Verdi's output. It's in his middle period, as musicologists like to call it, but it's early middle period. So it's not far removed from Donizetti, who is one of the great bel canto composers. And Donizetti and Verdi are in a direct line kind of musicality and composition. So we have these double arias that I've talked about a number of times with bel canto operas of Donizetti, Bellini, and Rossini. We still have those in early Verdi. The scene begins usually with a recitative where we set what's going on. We have a cavatina, which is the slow legato aria, and then we have a tempo di mezzo, which is literally the time in the middle where the trajectory of the scene changes because of the entrance of a character or the arrival of some news, some sort of scuffle, who knows. And then we have the cabaletta, which is a faster section, usually the same music repeated. And the repetition has ornamentation and even more spectacular things. When we get into Verdi, there's less free ornamentation that's done, and more of it is specified in the actual score or doesn't happen really at all. And there's usually a cadenza at the end of the slow section and the fast section. And a cadenza is where the orchestra drops out and the voice has a chance to display more of its gifts. This particular aria has some really quite impressive leaps. Playing it through, and I've done this aria a number of times with young sopranos. It's good for a baby Verdi soprano because they still need to maintain a little bit of lightness and agility so that they can negotiate some of the coloratura runs that happen in this role, but also have the weight and heft that is needed to carry this part. So her first in the first section of the Solita Forma, in the cavatina, she says, Ernani, Ernani, fly to me, and let us fly so that let us flee together so that we can live together and in happiness. And she talks about our life will be an Eden di delizia, which is an Eden, like the Garden of Eden, of delight for us together. So we have, it's not super slow, but it's still slower than the next section. Same text, but it gets fancier and fancier as she imagines the garden of joy that they will have together. She covers more than 2 octaves in that one run. High C and low B flat by middle C. So then we have the tempo di mezzo, and I won't play that, but the chorus of her handmaidens come in, and they say, you are, in marrying this person, Silva, you're the envy of every woman, the realm that you'll be able to, he's like a nobleman, so you'll be able to be the mistress of a great thing. So she's reminded, sadly, about this, and she goes on with the cabaletta, where she just says, I can't, what does she say? There is no gem, there is nothing that can make me change to love the hatred I feel for, it's either saying she can't imagine changing the love that she has for Ernani to hatred, or she can't imagine the hatred for Silva changing to love. But the point is, she is going to, I'm just trying to see, yeah. And she talks a lot about, that's on the fly, the word fly, oh time, and soon let's return to this happy instant. The good news is you have really good super titles that are not made on the fly like mine. So if you're wondering, if you've had trouble figuring out the super titles, you know that you can hover over the toolbar in the computer, or you can go to settings in your app and make sure that the super titles are activated, CC for closed caption. So I'm using that as a direct distraction technique so you don't remember that my Italian translation was very awkward. So here is the cabaletta, where she is in a totally different mood. It's a little bit, I don't know what, anyway. she went high B flat and then this skip. C. So jumping up and down in really spectacular vocal fashion. Some days technology is really difficult, and so I apologize for my Italian brain spaciness because this was just a bad technology day. I don't know if you're noticing this with work from home, and sometimes the day goes really smoothly, and sometimes every stupid Zoom call is a struggle. So I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna keep it real here. That's kind of what I'm facing at the moment. So for the character Silva, he comes in right after this for the character of Ernani, who we've already been introduced to him with his scene. The opening scene is with the bandits in the mountains. And then with this, we get these characters and they come in and the first thing they do is sing one of these double arias. It's kind of their entrance aria in the way we establish the character. And also it's kind of like in a Broadway play when the famous person who you've come to see comes in and there's like the Broadway applause. It's kind of that idea, just to sort of be like, look, here's the person you came to see. She's your great soprano. Let's hear what she can do, and then we'll move on with the plot. I mean, that's kind of, loosely sort of what's happening in a way. So, after this aria, the King of Spain shows up. Don Carlo is his name. He's the baritone who's also in love with her. During his declaration of love, Ernani rushes in to rescue her from Silva, and the two men face off. Before they can begin their duel, Silva enters and threatens the two and sings his entrance aria, Infelice, where he says to Ernani and to that you're the unhappy one, and how can you think that you're going to be able to be with this person? So, recognizing the king at that moment, Silva asks for and is granted forgiveness for coming in and, sort of getting involved in their duel. Ernani is dismissed and he vows revenge. And we have one of these amazing concertato finales, and I don't talk enough about those, but Verdi has these wonderful finales where you have the whole cast. In this case, they're counting minor roles and the four main people. There's 7 soloists plus a chorus, and they all are in their moment of, in this case, trying to. He says, io tremo solo per te. I tremble for you. This is when everybody's recognized the king. One person who's a minor character says, "Oh heavens, it is him, the king." So we have Ernani and Elvira being afraid for themselves, but then other people are like, "Oh my gosh, it's the king!" And the chorus is just saying "O cielo" at that moment. So big moment, "O cielo." And then it's the king. Then we have a long section of a cappella, relatively long, where the chorus and all the principals are singing they're different things. So we have Don Carlo singing one thing, we have Ernani and Elvira, we have the people that aren't really involved in the center of the drama saying, he showed his face to Silva, and everyone's like having a common thing, like I feel war in my heart, or I feel the flames of jealousy arising depending on who your person is. So you have this great moment. So that's this outburst in the presence of your king, they're saying, the chorus is saying. So this goes on for quite a bit, and then we get into the main moment, the concertato moment. It's an E flat, which is a favored key for these. It happens for Traviata, where Alfredo's thrown the money at Violetta, and they're all singing, she's saying, Alfredo, how can you do this to me? Alfredo's father's horrified. So they all have different points of view that they're expressing. The art of supertitles is really challenging because they have to choose which point of view they want you to focus on, because they can't translate all character stuff at once. The screen would be too complicated to look at. So we have, after this is a cappella right here, then the orchestra comes in. Leaves right now. This is the magic of all of it. So this great concertato finale, and then it goes into a stretto, which is the very fast, and where everyone for the concertato is kind of stunned and is in their own world, and then for the stretto the action just kind of goes crazy, and everyone realizes that we've hit a real crossroads. So I just want to point out that I just found this funny, that the relative heroism of the characters decreases with the range. So we got our hero who's a tenor, and then the bad guy is a bass. I mean, that just seems to be the way it always works out. The bass and the baritone, in some cases, always play the bad guys. So Act 2 sees the impending nuptials of Elvira and Silva, and Elvira now believes that Ernani has died. Ernani does infiltrate the castle, however, in the guise of a pilgrim, and reveals himself to Elvira. So the lovers are discovered by Silva, who says, "Oh, I'll help you out, but you're gonna owe me." And it's like The Godfather. You're gonna owe him, and you never know when he's gonna ask to be repaid. It could happen anytime. But we get this great trio then too, where Elvira is saying, "Oime," which is basically like, "Oh no." Si perde il misero, the miserable one has lost himself. He says, Ernani says, "Give me to the, you're going to give me to the king. I can, vostro sonio prigione, I am yours and a prisoner of yours. Give me to the king if you must as my reward." And then he says, "That will not be the case. I swear to you." This is Silva. He says, "Remain sure of that. Silva never will betray you. But in questa mura ogni ospite hai diritto in fratello." And then he says, "Follow me." He says, "Sapra il re," that I'm going to let you go. And then he says, "No vendetta più tremenda vos serbata alla mia mano." And it's a totally different thing. He said, "There will be a vengeance that I will expect from my hand, and you will have to hide yourself, and you will have to come back and do the thing that I ask you to do." So trio is like this. For three voices. cadenza for three voices. It's fun to keep that. Then this is where he says, there's going to be a really terrible vengeance that I'm going to ask of you. that's Silva saying this is going to be a terrible thing, and then they comment how horrible this is going to be. The Elvira and Ernani. And so forth. So in the next act, Carlo is visiting the ancestor grave, the grave of his ancestor Charlemagne, and at the time that the election that will determine his kingship is happening. He overhears a group of conspirators, including Silva and Ernani, plotting his murder. The traitorous nobles are sentenced to death, but Carlo pardons Ernani after Elvira very eloquently pleads for his life. Silva has his final revenge in the last act. Ernani and Elvira have finally gotten married when Silva calls in that favor promised in Act 2. Silva hands Ernani a dagger and says, "You're going to have to kill yourself." Ernani begs to be able to sip once from the cup of love. He says, "Solinga errante misero." At the end of my first year, bitter sufferings, a cup I must have. But he says, "May let that I can at least sip from la tazza dell'amor." And then Silva says, "Ecco la tazza," and he hands him the dagger. "Scegliere ma tosto io ti concedo," and he says, "You got to choose, but remember what I did for you." So we have, this is the line of, "Allow me at least to sip from the cup of love." So, of course, Ernani's nobility and honor demand that he honor his, I'm just saying honor about 4 times, his bargain with Silva. So he stabs himself and, of course, has just enough time to die eloquently singing in Elvira's arms. So a little bit of tragedy there for you. So I'm sorry about the leaf blowing in the background, but this is the charm. At least I have a new light, so there's a little better lighting here. So thanks for joining me. Thank you to Judy Brady and Drew Browning, who make these lectures available to you on Facebook and on YouTube. Thank you for joining me and for supporting the art of opera, whether it be here in Utah or in another city. We're very appreciative that you are of our audiences, and we long to join you back in the Opera House. So until then, wash your hands, take care of each other, and be very safe. Thank you.